Donald Trump meeting with the black pastors was very interesting. First of all, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot. I enjoyed seeing, obviously I haven't seen any video of inside the meeting, but I enjoyed the aftermath. I enjoyed the impromptu press conference where they spoke to the media. You have Omarosa right there, the very beautiful black woman that was to Donald Trump's right, to my left if I'm looking at the TV, and you had uh, one of the pastors there, and the pastor was a guy named Daryl Scott, and he gave an excellent response talking to the media. He talked about how the liberal media is making Donald Trump appear to be somebody that he's not. And I thoroughly enjoyed that because we need that kind of talk in the black community. We need people that will break away from the Democrat plantation, even if they lose some of their parishioners who may be hardcore, lock and step Democrat. That's a very hard thing to do when you have 94% of a community that vote locked up with the Democrat Party. It's very hard. So for him to do that, he had some stones on him. He was brave to do it, and I really enjoyed that. And the people that were surrounding him, it was a lot of black pastors, a lot of black folks, and they all kind of were in agreement. Now, of course, you will have some liberal blacks and liberals in general, and just Donald Trump haters to say that, they got paid. Well, look, you got pastors. You got pastors that have enough money to be able to travel and do different things. I don't think they're hurting for money, okay? I don't think money is the problem, all right? I think their parishioners treat them well. Money is not the issue. I think that this was necessary to happen, to have a meeting. What it was billed as 100 pastors coming to Trump Towers in New York, if I'm not mistaken, to endorse Donald Trump. But there's been some things that happened in between the time that it was originally planned and the time that it actually came to be, that it actually happened. People backing out at the last minute. People, when the pastors are going into the building, you got the news media outside, and then pastors are saying, "Well, I didn't come here to endorse Trump. I came here to have a dialogue." Because what happened, there was an incident with a Black Lives Matter protester who got rowdy and out of control and tried to interrupt Donald Trump, and he was summarily thrown out of the actual venue. And the media twisted it to say that he got punched and kicked and beat up. And then when Donald Trump was asked about how the Black Lives Matter protester, quote unquote protester, was handled, he said that, hey, maybe he should have been roughed up, which was the appropriate thing to say, in my opinion. It was the real thing to say, but I'm not quite sure if it was a politically correct thing to say, you know, because when you're acting up like that, you need to get tossed in your head. And people were saying it's racist. It's like, look, I've seen people get tossed on their head in clubs. I've seen a black and a white bouncer roll a white guy up like he was a cheap rug in between their arms like a battering ram and throw him out the actual place and dump him on his head. Sometimes that has to happen when you're belligerent, when you're drunk, when you're acting the fool and you refuse to leave, you refuse to stop doing what you're doing. Hey, that's why you have security to take care of problems like that. And that's what happened to the Trump protester. He was escorted out, kicked out by security. Okay. And if he fell on his hind parts on the way out, then so be it. Right. But people were upset about that. And of course, if you're going to church every Sunday and you're talking to the church and saying, hey, we're going to New York on the 28th or the 29th or the 30th, and we're talking to Donald Trump, they're like, well, did you see that on the news? Did you see that on Twitter? Blah, blah, blah. And then there was also a situation where he retweeted a stat. And I'll put his stat right here. I'll put a picture up of his retweet. And it was some black crime stats. Now, the stats were dead on accurate. It was just one mistake. They switched the percentage for whites murdered by blacks and whites murdered by whites. On the stat that he retweeted, whites murdered by blacks was 81% and whites murdered by whites was like 16. But really, that should have been reversed. Now, of course, the news media pounced all over it because it said, haha, the stats are false. But no, the stats weren't really false. They said the stats were bogus, like to make all of the stats bogus because it had other things on there. It had blacks killed by police, whites killed by police, blacks killed by blacks, whites killed by blacks, blacks killed by whites. It had all of those stats. So It was just those two that were just mislabeled. But if you switch that around, it was fixed. So the news media just pounced on it and said that he was retweeting false stats about black folks and he hates black people. I just wish he would have actually retweeted something that was dead on accurate. And then at that point, what can the media say? You know, I wish he would have just retweeted the correction, like double down on it and then retweet that what it actually is, and then try to have them back and say something about that. Because now you can go to the not the FBI. Don't go to the FBI for stats because they won't give you the complete set of stats. You know, the FBI will only give you information that they have been privy to. You got to go to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, and you got to go to the CDC, Center for Disease Control, because they keep death records, and they keep the record of the cause of death. So it's not necessarily a crime index. See, when you're talking about the FBI, they have crime index, and then we're talking about the CDC. They keep death records and diseases and what people get. That's what you need to be looking at, and it breaks it down. It breaks down. Matter of fact, I'll put some links in the description box below of the actual numbers from the CDC, from the government. Accurate numbers so you can see for yourself. Percentages, numbers, all that. You know, they got PDFs, they got whatever you need. So he should have done that, but he didn't. So parishioners are upset about that. And again, you're going to church every Sunday, you're passing around the plate, you're doing church announcements, you're saying, hey, we're going to New York on the 29th and the 30th. And your parishioners are like, wait a minute, he did this too. So he threw the Black Lives Matter protester out and he beat him up. And now he's retweeting false stats about us, making us look bad. I don't want you to go. So for that guy, Daryl Scott, to really just jump out the window and say, hey, I support him, I endorse him, he had stones, because he may lose a lot of his following by doing that. But overall, I definitely enjoyed it. I think we need to do more stuff like that. We need to have more brave people like Pastor Daryl Scott, like Omarosa, like any other pastors who may endorse Donald Trump, the black pastors. Because if we don't, I mean, look, what's going to happen to the black community? Seriously, like, what are we going to do if we don't change what's going on? And it's not just the black community. We're talking about the world. We're talking about at least the country. We're talking about the country here. If America becomes weak, a lot of other places in the world become weak. So we need to have the country strong, and that means all communities. That means all people. So big ups to Donald Trump for doing that. Shout out to the pastors that endorse and/or support him, and shout out to Omorosa. I think she was definitely key in making that happen. I think she probably was a conduit between Trump and the pastors, people that may have been kind of standoffish towards him. I think she was able to cultivate relationships and make that happen. I'm not sure about that 100% sure, but I think I'm right about that. Because, you know, Trump and Omorosa are good friends. I think she was on The Apprentice for like 10 years straight. So that's a good ally to have in this battle we waging. That's all I got to say. Subscribe, rate, share. Peace.